Now we will switch over right on time. We will switch over to the governor's panel. And President Cauce, I think that means you're up. And President Cauce, you're on mute still.
Okay, there we go. I can't tell you how many people in my life wish I came with a mute button. In any case, good morning. Good morning to everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here today to focus on this incredibly important topic, and to be here with some of the folks that have really shaped Washington State. In his opening remarks on day one of this conference, and I assume that should people introduce themselves, or do you want to take a couple minutes for introductions?
Yeah.
Okay, let's just jump into it. Everyone knows who everyone is. Okay. On his opening day one of the conference in July, Governor Inslee observed that the COVID-19 crisis in many ways was kind of a metaphor, in fact, kind of a dress rehearsal for the crisis of climate change. And, in many ways, I've been thinking about that, and it was such an apt metaphor. I think that if we look at it in terms of the negatives, we see the similarities. In both cases, we've seen a lot of denialism of science and of somehow, putting science, trying to, put scientists aside. We've also seen with COVID, and we will see that, and we're seeing that in terms of climate change, a disproportionate impacts on people of color. But I also think that there's real positive parts to that metaphor. In that I think that COVID has shown us, and climate change will show us, just how clearly interconnected the human family is, and also that we're not helpless, that there's actions that we can take to save lives and to save future generations. For example, we can curb COVID transmission rates by doing things like masking, washing our hands, distancing. We also have actions that we can take to lower CO2 emissions. But to make change, we have to be willing to invest in the things that we believe in. The purpose of this conference, as I see it, is to be willing to think about really big ideas, but also to embrace action. We don't want to do half measures, yet at the same time, we want to be able to make fast, measurable progress. And so, we want to think big, we want to think bold, but we also want to act quickly. And this is really going to be important because, health and environmental sustainability of the Pacific Northwest is absolutely critical to all our lives here in the Northwest and, quite frankly, around the world. This conference has explored the collective experience of 150 regional leaders. They've reflected on how we live and work, how we move and what spaces we occupy, and how we build and sustain community. And I'm really honored to be able to speak with 3 of Washington's former governors. These are people who have absolutely shaped where we're at now, and we're going to ask them to share their own experience of leading through the crises we face today and the ones that undoubtedly lie ahead for our region. Between them, they have governed the state of Washington for a combined 28 years. And they continue to be some of our region and nation's most esteemed leaders. I will go ahead and introduce you, but very briefly, because you really don't need introductions. We have Governor Christine Gregoire, 22nd Governor of Washington, who's also former Director of the State Department of Ecology and a 3-time State Attorney General. Thank you for being here so much, Chris. We also have Governor Gary Locke, the 21st Governor of Washington, who also served as U.S. Ambassador to China and as U.S. Secretary of Commerce during the Obama administration. And I'm glad that he's, now working with me in higher education. Thank you so much for being here, Governor Locke, Gary. And then we also have Governor Dan Evans, Washington's 16th governor and former U.S. Senator and a lifelong advocate for preserving Washington's wilderness areas. I know he's still out there taking youngsters hiking. So Governor Evans, is he? I don't see his face. Is he here? Okay, well, I was going to ask him a question.
Anna Marie, this is Gene. I just talked to the governor and he said he was on the phone. So I will call him back and get him connected. So we'll get him on soon.
Okay, well then let me turn to Governor Gregoire. The COVID-19 pandemic has led to fundamental changes in our region's transportation needs. The reasons range from anxiety about the use of mass transit to increased telecommuting. How should the state be rethinking transportation to accommodate changing needs while also addressing climate impacts?
Well, hi, Anna Marie. Thank you for moderating this panel. Gene, thank you for putting this all together for everybody attending. And it's great to be with Gary and hopefully with Dan. You know, one of my greatest concerns about transportation right now is the fact that we were pre-COVID one of the leaders in the country in use of public transportation. And now in the middle of COVID, or hopefully in the middle of COVID, we find ourselves where people are driving alone again, concerned about public transportation, unwilling to take it. Somehow culturally, we've got to get back to that, because if nothing else, I think we've seen worldwide that suddenly the skies opened up in countries where they heretofore had not been able to see mountains. The rivers and the lakes, suddenly you could see, and that's the car. So if ever anybody wanted to deny the science and the data, all they needed to do is see the result of taking cars off the road in countries globally and what it meant to water quality, what it meant to air quality, what it meant to the health of the people of those respective countries. So I personally think we should continue to invest in public transportation. So as the co-chair of Cascadia, which is the corridor from British Columbia down to Portland, Oregon, we're advocating that we have high-speed rail or something equivalent to that, where literally we could commute from Seattle to Vancouver, British Columbia in under 60 minutes, or from Seattle to Portland in under 60 minutes. If we were able to do that, can you imagine the ability of people, unfortunately, because of the cost of affordable housing in Seattle now, to be able to live further out, be able to afford and be able to commute in if they choose, or be able to work from home and come in periodically if they choose. But I'm a huge advocate that now's the time to take advantage of this situation. When we hit the crisis of the recession when I was in office, we had a motto of don't let the crisis go to waste. I would say the same thing here. Be big, be bold, go now. You can't wait. The window is here. If you wait a couple years and try and take action, time will have passed us by. So time to seize the moment, think big, and think about how to get people even more out of their cars in any way we've ever thought before. Give them also affordable housing, and give them jobs, I hope, that will not be concentrated in simply one area, but expanded throughout the region so that people can live, work, and play in the area that they want to.
That is terrific. I'm going to push you a little bit more on your thoughts about the telecommuting. I mean, we have, some people that are thinking, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, and we're all going to be telecommuting, and others who, I can't wait to get back to my office and have people scream at me if that's what it takes.
I think that's a story yet not done. You hear a lot of talk about, particularly in the business community, about how we're going to keep people working from home. I'll be interested to see in a year if that's what they think. Let me share with you the immediate concern of the business community in work from home was that productivity would plummet. In fact, just the opposite has occurred, and the result of which is we have burnout. So we've got to find some ways to deal with this. But if we can't telework to the degree we're doing now, if that's not our future, at least when we have a meeting in downtown Seattle that's 6 blocks away, we don't have to get in a car, go get into another parking lot, and go into the meeting. We have got to seize the moment to ensure that we continue some of what we've started here, if not a lot, in terms of teleworking, telemeetings, telemedicine, because I think those really will give us the kind of environmental sustainability we much need to get out of our cars and be able to protect our quality of air, quality of land, quality of water.
Terrific, Governor Gregoire. I agree with you. I think that this is a story that's still being written out, and great thoughts on that. Governor Locke, I know that you care deeply about issues around equity, and the pandemic has certainly made us increasingly aware of systemic racism and how inequality is deeply rooted in our institutions and workplaces, and it plays out in terms of sustainability and climate as well. You know, what are your thoughts as we move towards a more sustainable future? How do we do that without more deeply embedding some, systemic racism that in fact is something that we want to remove?
Well, I think that as Chris indicated, the story is still being told, and we really won't know the real implications of COVID-19, but already we're seeing the disproportionate and discriminatory impacts of COVID-19 in terms of who's becoming ill. And when businesses are being shut down, what type of workers are being laid off and furloughed or losing their jobs completely when businesses close. And we're seeing that certainly in the education area too, when students are not able to go back to school. I mean, a lot of the students at Bellevue College and throughout our community technical colleges are students that have a family and are working part-time. And so if they're out of a job, can they afford to maintain their college education? And if they even are able to stay as a student, do their homes have high-speed internet so that they can actually continue education in an online environment? A lot of our telecommunications carriers and cable companies and so forth have been offering free temporary hotspots, limited hotspots, so that students can continue their courses online. But many of those programs are expiring. And so what will students do? You look at, for instance, transportation that Chris was talking about. We've already seen cutbacks in our regional bus systems, Metro, because of reduced hours and concerns about spreading the disease and so forth. And so if and when the economy does rebound, and maybe it's on a limited basis, and if more people are still partially telecommuting, and given the finances of local and state governments and certainly organizations like Metro, how will they be able to continue offering the bus routes and the bus service, especially for communities of color and low-wage workers who depend on public transportation to get to work? And even if there's a change in the type of work environment, whether it's in downtown Seattle or major corporations, even if they're partially online, whether it's a Google or other companies where their workers will be staying online, a lot of the low-wage workers who are the maintenance workers and the people who provide those back support services, they will not be doing that online. They're going to have to go to work. And how will they get to work if there's reduced transit? And of course, if they rely on an automobile, then that's exacerbating our environmental issues as well. So I'm very concerned about the long-term impact of COVID-19 and the disruption, not just posed immediately, but the disruption that it will have in terms of how people go to work and how people commute and everything else. So I think we need to really focus on some of these issues that are kind of lurking below the surface.
Yeah, no, this has certainly made us redefine what we think of as essential workers. And we need to take that more seriously. And please, feel free to chime in, Governor Gregoire, or is Governor Evans, was he able to call in?
They're working on it right now. Sorry about that.
Okay,
So
terrific.
Anna-Marie, can I add
Yes.
one thing to the great comments of Gary?
Please do.
One of the inequities that I think is a tragedy from COVID is our youngest learners.
Yes.
We know that preschool is essential to get kids ready to learn by the time they hit kindergarten. We know that potentially kindergarten, first and second grade may be the most important years of education to a child. We know that if a kid can't read well by third grade, they may never catch up. And we've got way too many of our kids who do not have the ability to do virtual learning, don't have the family setting that allows them to do virtual learning. And quite frankly, virtual learning for that age group doesn't give them the behavioral health, the social health that they so much deserve. So I'm a wholehearted supporter of Governor Inslee's announcement last week, where let's really prioritize K through 5. There is growing evidence they don't transmit like those in high school and beyond. And the loss, we're not going to make up anytime soon. So we got to get those little ones ready. So they're ready to succeed. They're ready to go to Bellevue College. They're ready to go to the UW. They're ready to have a good paying job. But I think this is a tragedy that we haven't focused on enough, and it's going to be long lasting unless we get them back in school and we do something to supplement the loss.
Yes, no, and if I might add to that, that also it's not just the loss, but also widening the gap. I just went to get a haircut this morning, and the person who was, you know, very distant at the other side of the salon was talking about how she's got tutors coming in, you know, for her family, et cetera. And so it's, you know, we aren't just seeing a loss overall, but also a widening of the gap.
Yep.
So thank you so much for bringing that up. There's no question about it. You know, let me ask, either one of you can chime in on this one, or, you know, Governor Evans when he comes in. A lot of jobs have been
Governor
lost.
Evans is on, it should be on right now.
Okay, well, you know, thank you, Governor Evans. I was going to ask you this question first, and so if you would like to take it, but if not, you know, we certainly would be glad to hear from Governors Gregoire or Locke. But many jobs have been lost to the pandemic, and some of them won't return. And so, you know, looking past the pandemic, how should we be rethinking job creation to create jobs that are going to be resistant to the impacts of climate change and embrace this as an opportunity for a greener economy?
President Cauce, I think he might just be on mute, and because I think he's just only on the phone is how he's connecting.
Okay.
So Governor Evans, if you'd unmute, that'd be great.
Governor,
Haven't quite gotten him connected yet.
okay.
Sorry about that.
Okay. Terrific. Would you know, Governor Gregoire or Locke, would you like to think about that?
Well, let me just say that I've been thinking about this whole issue of workforce retraining and the future work, well, the changing workplace. McKinsey several years ago said that by the year 2030, 5 to 10% of the world's workforce will be displaced due to AI and robotics. Now that's 5 to 10% of the world's workforce. Well, you know that countries like Myanmar and maybe the Congo or other parts of Southeast Asia really don't have a highly sophisticated workforce or much of a workforce at all. And so maybe this 5 to 10% worldwide dislocation will really happen in the advanced industrialized countries like the United States, the EU, Korea, Taiwan, and other parts of Asia. So does that mean that in the United States alone, it might be more like 8 to 12% of our workers 10 years from now will be displaced, have their jobs lost because of AI? We know that the new economy will create new jobs, and that's great for the kids coming out of high school or college. But what about today's worker who's 43 years old, 10 years from now being dislocated and out of a job, 53 years old? Are we expecting them to go back to the University of Washington and take a course in coding? What are we doing now to prepare those workers for the changing workforce dynamics and the changing needs of and characteristics of corporations and companies 10 years from now? If we wait 10 years from now, it's going to be too late.
Right.
And so I think we need to start preparing for that. And certainly online work is going to exacerbate that tension, that gap between the haves and the have-nots and the people with skills. And so if our unemployment insurance funds were more robust, because right now they're pretty much bankrupt due to the unemployment benefits we've been giving out because of COVID-19. It's going to take several years to build back up that trust fund. But wouldn't it be great if people could actually draw upon unemployment insurance almost like a flexible health savings account and use that for job training now and get ahead of this huge crisis that's going to face us in 10 years? So that's something that I very much worry about. And
Absolutely.
otherwise, our electorate will be susceptible to the demagogues, whether from the left or the right, promising a return to nirvana or years past, and vote for me, and I'm going to bring back life as we knew it. Just as we've had some candidates say, vote for me, and we're going to close off the borders, we're going to kick out immigrants, we're going to beat up on China, and we'll bring back coal, and everything life will be rosy as it was in the days of Father Knows Best and Donna Reed, or
Yes. June Cleaver here.
Yeah.
Anamari,
Sounds like Dan is on the line.
Yeah. Hi, Dan.
Oh,
Hi. Good to have you here.
well, the trouble is that I'm getting, somebody is beeping me constantly, and now it's quit. So I can finally, there's somebody still beeping me for some reason. Anyhow, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
It's fabulous
All
to
right.
have you here.
Well,
I know
I'm
that you
sorry it
care.
took some time.
Yeah,
Go
I know
ahead.
that you care very deeply about the environment and about sustainability. We were talking a little bit about the jobs of the future that would be resistant to the impacts of climate change and the impacts of the kinds of disruptions that we're having now.
Well, it seems to me.
Okay, technology. This really does bring up some of the issues that may be worth talking about, like social safety nets. And I've certainly heard people talk about how we should look at the internet the way we look at electricity these days, and it should be something that's available to everybody. And we're seeing some of that right now.
So, Anamari, I was going to say something very much akin to that. Past kind of revolutions, if you will, in the country have brought everybody up, whether it was electricity or transportation or what have you. And technology has separated us. It's divided us. And I think Gary's comments are right on. Where are we going to be in 10 years? What can we do now? And what we can do now is bridge that divide when it comes to technology. I was really excited about the announcement that Microsoft made about investing and making sure that people all across the country have the technical skills to use the internet, to use technology, to use in applying for a job. And on the environmental front, that's the future. That is the future. So if we can, and we started back, I bet, when Gary was in office, and we really ramped it up when I was in office, and that is investing in those jobs that are going to address things like climate change and all the other environmental issues that we're facing, because that is really where a lot of really good jobs can be for our future. But step one is right now, we've got to take this divide that we've created in the country with technology and bridge it.
Absolutely. There's no question about it. It will continue to be an increasing issue. One more area that has come up that COVID has really made us rethink is, I think we were all going towards the notion of urban density, and that was the direction that we should be taking in terms of affordability, the quality of life, etc. And in this age where we have gotten a little bit nervous about being too close, that's being rethought. Do you think that's momentary? I mean, what do you see in terms of what our neighborhoods, our communities look like in terms of urban centers? Governor Locke?
Well, I would hope that that's momentary because we're still very much social creatures. And yes, given the high cost of living in the central Puget Sound area, especially in the Seattle area, that may encourage more people to move up and along the I-5 corridor into some of our more suburban rural areas. But I would hope that we still put a premium on things like the growth management plan. And I see Larry Phillips is part of this conference, and he was very, very active when I was county executive in helping put together the county's growth management plan, and Gene and others who were part of this, and Jim Greenfield were very much involved in that, where we had really tight and strong urban rural boundaries, and really encouraging the cities and the suburban areas to still increase their density within their growth management areas. I mean, it is so much more cost effective in terms of the impact on taxpayers. I mean, if we have to have roads and sewer systems and water systems and schools and all this infrastructure to the far-flung areas of our region and of our state, that's very, very expensive. And I would hope that at least, and there's greater need for density, and that's going to actually mean lower cost housing in the long run, and reduce cost of providing basic services, whether it's police, fire, education, and so forth. I would hope that we will have learned from this COVID-19 environment that our public health systems will be much stronger and more robust, and that we'll be able to respond to future pandemics and so forth. But even if you're living in rural parts of the state, as we're seeing now, you're not immune to the pandemic and COVID-19. And so it really means that we should not take our eye off of sticking with our environmental plans of preserving our rural areas, agricultural, forest lands, and having open spaces, and avoiding the sprawl that many other communities in the United States and around the world have fallen into.
Yeah,
and I join Gary in that, and a big emphasis on thanking Larry for the foresight to put the GMA in place. I do think, and I think this group has talked about it, that it needs refreshing. If we look at those essential workers upon which we have all relied to get us through COVID, the vast majority of those people cannot afford to live in the city. And that, to me, is a crime. It's not only a racial inequity, it's a financial inequity, and it's just not a robust community when the very essential people that serve the community can't afford to live there. And so density and some of what comes with that, which in Seattle seems to be a four-letter word, we're just going to have to accept if we're going to be able to ensure that we have robust communities, that it's affordable, that everybody who wants to can live there. And those who don't want, we've got to make sure that we address that as well. If we don't address this issue, we can't attack climate change, because people are having to commute, and that is adding to our problems. So if we want to attack climate change, we've got to make the density in places like Seattle and Vancouver and Portland much more affordable than what they are today.
Yeah, it's interesting. When basically things were really at its peak in New York, I was talking to a lot of people who said that's the end of density. But we've seen they've been able to turn it around. And so, that really does tend to suggest that, yes, there are risks, but right now we'd love to be in New York's shoes in our state.
One of the things that's going to come about, I think one of the lasting impacts of COVID-19 has been everything going online, whether it's education to retail and work. A lot of that will continue. Certainly the experience of it in education is that more courses are going online. That was already a trend. And that has really brought education to the masses in far-flung areas of our state and our region who want to be able to pursue, upgrade their skills, and take courses that they long wanted to take from the convenience of their home on weekends, after the kids have gone to sleep or after the work hours. And so technology is really enabling more things to reach more people that have not been traditionally served. And it's certainly happening in education. It's happening in commerce, where people can actually sell their things to all parts around the world. They don't need a huge marketing, distribution system. But one of the things that we're seeing in retail is that even putting back up and the shops are opening up, traffic is pretty low, but people are still buying things online. But think about it, so much of that packaging is so environmentally destructive. All of that styrofoam and plastic that comes in the stuff that arrives on our doorstep. I know that Amazon has made these pledges to be completely carbon neutral, but wouldn't it be great if the environmental groups in our state could work with our major retailers to get rid of unfriendly, climate damaging packaging materials. I noticed that, for instance, like IKEA, because I got kids that are in college and everything, and they're buying stuff, inexpensive furniture for their dormitories and things like that. IKEA's packaging is primarily cardboard, all right? With the stuff that you buy from IKEA, it's cardboard packaging. The stuff that you get from Amazon and other places, or Pottery Barn, it's all styrofoam. What do you do with all that? And I would think that it'd be great, given our environmental record here and how Earth Day started in the state of Washington, if we can use the power of collaboration between the states of Washington, Oregon, and California, and our governors and our major businesses to actually set a national world trend in terms of packaging. And even the envelopes that we get, why does it have all that plastic inside? I can't recycle that. And so I think that we can all focus, given the fact that life is changing, and that thanks to the advent of technology and online services, more people are going to be buying things online, ordering things. And what is the sustainability of all those practices?
No, absolutely. Today was recycling day in my neighborhood, and there was all the plastic that couldn't be, and some of that I can take and recycle. But you're absolutely right, and we have the possibility to innovate other ways of doing this, because if we look at the future, you're right, there's going to be more and more done online. Governor
Lori, can I
yes,
add one positive?
Please do.
That I think is coming out of COVID, and I hope lasts. And that is, we were trying to test out telemedicine pre-COVID, and we were failing miserably. And it has just activated it. And what I think it's shown is we can transform the cost of healthcare. We can make it the profession less burnout for our doctors and nurses and so on. We can increase the equity of access to care that we are seeing so vividly displayed by COVID. We've got to look at reimbursement. That is a huge challenge now. But one positive that, and you know this very well because of UW Medicine, one positive I think is telemedicine, and yes, I hope it's one thing that sticks with us.
Very good point. Absolutely. I think that it has, that we are finding that there are some things that need to be done in person, but there's a lot of things that can be done online. And you're absolutely right. You know, Governor Evans, do we have you back?
Well, yeah, I hope so.
We've been talking about a whole range of things.
Well, I've been listening, but somehow I can't get in.
All
But,
right, well,
but I am now.
Feel free to comment on any of the things that we've talked about. We really would appreciate your wisdom.
Well, I think that we've got an opportunity with the disruption that COVID has provided to come back to a different future instead of just kind of reassembling where we were. It seems to me that this is a time to really be bold and not just go back to where we once were. If you look back through history, and I'm a devoted reader of history, the work week a century ago or a century and a half ago was, it's an 80-hour, and then it went down to 70, and then it went down to 60, and then 50. We finally got to a 40-hour week, and we're stalled. Some other countries have even gone beyond that, but it seems to me for the future, there is no reason we can't be bold enough to set a work week that is somewhat less than our current 40 hours, at full pay, not with reduced pay. That opens up opportunity for more jobs. It requires companies to be, or at least it would encourage them to be more efficient, more effective, the work people to be more effective. But why should we be stalled on a 40-hour week when our predecessors and previous generations constantly worked to bring it down, which opens up more opportunity for people to enjoy their families, but also to take part voluntarily in helping our community to be better. And I think that that's exactly what people would do. Given more time, there's more opportunity to be involved with the community in a whole variety of ways. And I'm frankly disappointed that we seem to have come to a point where, we're stalled, not only stalled on a work week, but more and more people are being pushed to add to their work week, add more hours, and I just think that we're kind of stalled in a fashion that we should not be. I guess that's my early sermon for the day.
No, that's a really good point that we are, I think that, I can't wait till we get over COVID, let's be very clear, but I don't want to go back to the way it is, to the way it was. We want to go back to a better reality and thinking about the work week and thinking about commuting, thinking about how we live. Everything that we've been talking about are issues that, are front and center. We were just talking about healthcare and being able to do more online. Governor Locke and, please, anyone feel free to, chime in. What policies or approaches should be considering to balancing, to thinking about making sure that public health is ensuring that our region is healthy enough to weather a future crisis? How should we be building? One of the things that is a critique is that we knew that there might be a pandemic coming, and yet we didn't do the things to prepare for it, or we started to and then we stopped. We know that we're going to have climate change. How should we be thinking about public health so that we're prepared for it?
Well, first of all, I just want to remind people that they need to fill out the 2020 census. We only have about 67% of the households in the state of Washington who've responded to the 2020 census. And that determines billions and billions of dollars of allocations to all the different states and communities based on population. And one big recipient of census money or federal dollars based on the census is public health. And we've seen that our public health systems nationally and locally were completely unprepared. We've known about the potential pandemics. And so obviously we need to start having almost exercises and tabletop drills and simulations of how to respond and how to get the word out. Because there will be some other major pandemics coming around the pike. We've been having these almost every 8 years or so. We've been able to contain some of these, whether it was H1N1 virus and things like that earlier when President Obama was in office, and it required a huge coordinated federal response, focusing on the science, leaning on and relying on the experts. And then it also required on local public health to deliver and get the word out. So obviously we need a lot more coordination between at the federal and the state and the local levels on these. And we have to have the data. We have to have the data. We have to have these reports, and we have to have the ability to drill down and find out what populations are being affected, which ones are really susceptible, and what parts of the state or what parts of King County, and how did people contract it? I mean, we're seeing an uptick, for instance, even in King County in terms of the numbers per 100,000 in King County. It's been slowly going up, but we're not really told in what parts of the King County and among which populations and what are the characteristics of those who are getting it and why, so that we can really understand, are there certain types of behavior that is really dangerous and that we should really try to avoid, I would say. So I think it's clearly we need to beef up the funding and the coordination of our health agencies.
As I look at COVID and what are the lessons learned, healthcare, public health, procurement, congregate care, we all had confidence in all of that, and our confidence was completely misplaced. We don't have a system of public health in the state of Washington, or in the country for that matter. We have 39 siloed delivery systems of public health, underfunded, and we haven't relied enough, as Gary said so appropriately, on data, science, and research, and we haven't invested in the ability to do that. When you saw the crash at the Department of Health at the state level, because they don't have the system in place to be able to even give us the data, that is a cry for, we've got to do something different. So I think coming out of COVID, being bold, attacking the issues, we've got to attack. We need a public health system. We cannot rely on procurement like we did when it first hit. I received a call from a major provider in the state who literally had 3 days of PPE for them right then. And nobody in the state able to procure from foreign countries, which we were left to do because we weren't manufacturing in our own country and we weren't getting any help from the federal government. Then you look at the hospitals. It was each man, each woman for themselves. That is not a system, and it's not a system that readies us to be resilient in a pandemic time. Look at the congregate care problem that we saw, not just in our state, but around the country. So those are lessons we've got to learn, take action, be bold, use it now to put in a public health system, a hospital system, a congregate care system, find a way to ensure procurement, whether it's food or PPE. Find a way that we can make sure we're using data, we're using science, we're doing the research, and we're investing and funding those essentials.
I think that what you've all brought up in one way or another, but certainly you hit very clearly now, is the fact that the need for coordination, the need for collaboration across counties, certainly across states. I mean, at one point, it almost seemed like, one state was trying to outbid the other. And climate change is also, it's not going to be something that we're going to solve you know, in one county versus another. It's going to require, you know, how do we as a region, as a country, start building that ability to really have regional, national, global responses? What do we need to do on the political level to do that?
I'd love to hear from Dan on this one. He's served in the U.S. Senate and as a governor.
Well, first we need a new president.
Well, that's right, but a new president isn't enough. You know, the interesting thing is that we have, for whatever reasons, over the past 20 or 30 years, divided ourselves much more heavily than we were before. I remember vividly the once a year measure of the Congress by one of the internal or external publications that followed Congress very closely. And once a year, they conducted a study of every member of Congress, ranking them on domestic, you know, financial affairs, social affairs, foreign affairs. They had 4 or 5 different elements, and they ranked every member according to whether they were liberal or conservative. In the Senate, it was pretty easy. With 100 members, your ranking was 1 out of 100 or wherever you were. The interesting thing was that the most liberal Republicans overlapped significantly with the most conservative Democrats. So there was an interplay that was very healthy and very helpful. The last time they did this last year, the most conservative Democrat was considerably more liberal than the most liberal Republicans. There was a gap between the two parties which didn't exist before. We have divided as a nation politically in ways that I think are harmful. I'm not wise enough to say how we correct all of that, but I'm a great believer of something my grandfather told me when I was just a kid. He said, "You've got 2 ears to listen with and 1 mouth to talk, so you ought to listen twice as much as you talk." And that would be a darn good advice for our political leadership. But and listening is better than it's more than just hearing people. I've too often I've heard people say, "Yeah, I hear you." Well, hearing isn't enough. Listening is hearing and then understanding what somebody else is saying. As I said, I'm not wise enough to know how we get back to that kind of interchange, but we desperately need to do so. The division we now see is harmful to our nation. It's harmful to our future. It's harmful to our mental health, for heaven's sakes.
I don't think you're going to get any disagreement, because
No, the trouble is, I posed the problem. I haven't posed any answers yet.
Well, I think
sure
that, you know, we've talked about, and it really is important, of course, that, you know, we all make sure to you know, do our census, fill out our census forms. It's also going to be really important that we all vote. Citizen advocacy is going to be clearly something that's going to be part of working together with our government agencies. Turns out, I mean, gosh, time really flies. We only have a few minutes left. I'm going to turn it over to each of you if you want to make some last minute comments about anything that we maybe haven't talked about. I'm not sure. You know, if we had more time, I'd want to talk a little bit more about our mental and emotional health during this time. So anything we didn't talk about, or some closing comments? So I'll start with you, Governor Gregoire.
I just want to thank Gene for all of his commitment and passion for this, for everybody in the working groups who've been a part of this. This kind of working together to look out at a future, a willingness to be bold, think outside the box, don't let the crisis go to waste is exactly what we need. And so I just want to say thanks for letting me be a small part to this discussion. Look forward to the ultimate blueprint and look forward to helping support it 1,000%. Keep going, guys. This is exactly what we need. Everybody engaged, everybody involved, looking at a future and doing so in a bold and visionary way.
Governor Locke.
Well, we're going to get past this COVID-19 crisis. It certainly is having a dramatic impact on various populations, various segments of workers, communities of color. It's really showing the disparities in terms of our social structure and our economic structure in our country. And it's certainly having an impact on the environment and will continue to have an impact, both positive and negative. But the question is, after this COVID-19 crisis passes, after there's a vaccine, and what is the new normal? And what is that new normal in terms of communities and people of color, in terms of students, in terms of workers, in terms of public transportation, healthcare? And what will it mean in terms of the impact to the environment, whether it's from a decrease in traffic or an increase in solo drivers and a decrease in public transit? And what will be the impacts to people as a result of all those different moving forces? What will be the future of education? What will be the future of work? And so forth. So I'm glad that while we're talking about the impacts of the environment, we need to still think, the immediate impacts of COVID-19 on all these different issues, but we need to also think about how we're going to address the challenges posed by the post-COVID-19. And that's why the work of this group and Jean bringing everyone together and focusing on really the anniversary of Earth Day and using this as an opportunity to really move forward and think about the future is so important. So I compliment everybody for the great work and all the recommendations and and all the thought that's been going on over the last several weeks. So keep up the great work.
Thank you. And Governor Evans, parting words.
Well, out of every crisis comes opportunity, and I think that's precisely where we are now. There will be a vaccine that I think will prove to, wherever it's developed, prove to be effective. It will put this particular pandemic behind us, but that's not enough. This is an opportunity for real change, and I hope that it will be one of the elements of our future. I hope will be an opportunity for people to unleash their voluntary genius to play a more important role in what happens nationally. We engage in work, we engage in family activities, but the offering of our volunteer efforts and our volunteer genius as what has always made this country distinctive from virtually every other. And we need to reestablish that, to expand it, to open up the opportunities for people to volunteer in their communities and in their nation. And I think that the volunteer sector of our society, really given full opportunity, is the way we begin to pull ourselves together. Our political system tends to divide us. Our voluntary system can bring us together. And it seems to me one of the most vital things that could come out of the results of this pandemic is a concentrated effort to bring us back to at least partially together. We'll always have political differences, but to bring us back to a point where we can listen to each other and as a result of true listening, make some better decisions for our future. I'm not a pessimist. I'm an optimist about our ability to do that. It's the one good thing that I think can and perhaps will, especially if we work at it, come out of this pandemic.
Well, thank you for your optimism, and thank you all for taking the time to be with us today. Thank you so much, Jean, for all the work that you're doing, organizing these important conversations. I can certainly tell you from the perspective of working on a college campus, I'm sure Governor Locke could do the same, that this is so incredibly important. The environment is front and center for our young people, and it is a bipartisan issue for our young people. And I think that this conversation about sustainability does hold in it the promise of bringing us together to work together for common causes and to, you know, really set us up for a future that's not going to be going backwards, but going forwards. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna Marie.
Thank you.
President Cauce, thank you very much. Thank you, panel. These are really remarkable words, and yes, we need to move forward. And with the citizens of the Pacific Northwest, I think we will.